It's Fight News Now Extra. I'm John Pollock with John Ramdeen joining me in a couple of minutes as we discuss one of the bigger stories in recent memory, with Anderson Silva failing an out-of-competition drug test. Nick Diaz fails his post-fight drug test from this past weekend, and the UFC loses another main event, and Jacare has a solution for UFC 184. The news came out Tuesday night from Kevin Iole of Yahoo Sports that both Anderson Silva and Nick Diaz have failed their drug screenings from UFC 183. In the case of Silva, he was tested randomly back on January the 9th, with the results not coming back from the Salt Lake City, Utah laboratory until Tuesday of this week. The results revealed the anabolic steroids drostanolone and androstane in Silva's A sample, which was tested twice. Diaz, conversely, was above the allowable limit of marijuana metabolites in his post-fight urine test. Both will appear in front of the Nevada Athletic Commission on February the 17th. Joe Rogan spoke on his podcast recently about the propensity of eye pokes we are seeing in mixed martial arts. Rogan said he has spoken with UFC President Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta, and that they would like to see harsher penalties for those that poke another fighter in the eye. He stated that White would like 1 point to be deducted whenever there is an eye poke as a harsh deterrent to clamp down on the amount of eye pokes. Gilbert Faria, the manager of Ronaldo Jacare Souza, spoke to Guilherme Cruz of MMAfighting.com regarding the state of the middleweight title picture for UFC 184, with Chris Weidman injured. There was discussion of an interim title fight with the original challenger Vitor Belfort fighting Lyoto Machida. Belfort wanted more time to prepare for Machida. Faria states that Jacare is willing to fight any of the top contenders for the interim title on that date, citing Machida, Luke Rockhold, Yoel Romero, and Belfort as opponents Jacare would fight. And Rafael Assunção is going to have to wait a bit longer for a return to the octagon, as his ankle fracture is not going to heal in time for him to fight Urijah Faber at the UFC's Fight Night event in Rio de Janeiro on March 21st. Assunção rolled the ankle initially and led to Renan Barão getting the next bantamweight title fight against TJ Dillashaw, and then Assunção was booked to fight Faber with the belief that his ankle would be 100% by then. Assunção last fought in October of last year with a win over Brian Caraway in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and UFC officials are looking for a replacement to fight Faber in the main event of the March 21st event. John Ramdeen is with us. Very big news coming out of Nevada today. Anderson Silva getting popped for an out-of-competition test, and this is a weird part, and it comes down on how this all was handled. This test took place on January the 9th. This result came in on February the 3rd, which to me, I don't understand this. I think this is a giant question that gets thrown, not just at the commission, but the laboratory they outsourced in Utah to process this. I mean, what is the point of testing someone out of competition before the fight if the results are coming in after, and we're sending a fighter into the cage on this stuff?
Wasn't it the same situation with John Jones?
It was the case of he was tested before, and the results...
They found out, they knew the result, but they couldn't release it till after the fight.
I think a big difference, though, from cocaine to anabolic steroids in this case. But that's just one of many questions that come out of this. But what is your reaction here? Anderson Silva, primarily. I mean, Nick Diaz is part of this too, but I think the focus is Anderson Silva.
Yeah, well, Anderson Silva says he did not do it, or he did not knowingly take steroids. But, you know, the argument is, it would make sense if he did, you know, suffering that leg injury, having those 2 losses to Chris Weidman, trying to rebound, kind of in the twilight of his career, so to speak, 40 years of age. So it would make sense that he would do that. You know, this steroid also helps him retain muscle mass, so he wasn't able to train the way that he needed to train leading up to this fight or after the last loss to Chris Weidman. You know, he's in a cast and not able to focus on his strength and conditioning. So I think if he did do this, it would all make sense why he did it. And, you know, let's just say he did do it. He gets suspended for a year. Anderson Silva is still one of the biggest stars in mixed martial arts. You know, we heard at the post-fight press conference, you know, his family's already telling him that he should hang up the gloves. We've heard other fighters say that, you know what, Anderson Silva has proven that he's one of the greatest, if not the greatest fighters of all time. I think he should hang up the gloves. And if Anderson Silva's thinking about that, it's like, why not get another payday? He's going to be walking away from this UFC 183 fight with millions of dollars. So if you have to take steroids to make sure that you're ready to perform on fight night, you got to do what you got to do.
Well, for this guy, though, I mean, I look at the larger picture here, and sometimes we're in a bubble and talk about things that are bad for the sport. brawls between John Jones and Daniel Cormier, CM Punk being signed. To me, very minor issues in the grand scheme of things. But what we're seeing right now, if you're a Fox, if you're a Reebok, if you're an average fan out there looking at this sport and you're seeing all these guys getting popped, it's really starting to color this sport, rightly or wrongly, as this drug sport, where these guys go into the octagon on who knows what, doing all this damage to other guys. I mean, that's, to me, look at Nick Diaz, who was put in this position. I mean, granted, may have been under the influence of marijuana in the days prior, but going into there against Anderson Silva on anabolic steroids, I think this is one of those things that the long-term effect on the sport is detrimental.
I agree, but you just have to look at the history of the sport. And you look at Josh Barnett, who was the former UFC heavyweight champion. This guy tested positive in the past. The UFC welcomed him back. Vitor Belfort's tested positive. Countless guys throughout the years have tested positive, and they only got a slap in the wrist. So you can understand, if you're the #1 guy in the sport, again, 40 years of age, and you want to ensure your own safety, I think it's not that bad of an idea, considering the fact you see that you only get a slap on the wrist.
What happens when there's an inevitable case where someone takes significant damage in a fight, and the guy administering that gets popped for drostanolone, for any of these, stanozolol? I mean, that to me is inevitable, that we're going down this path where the idea of Anderson Silva in a fight, and you're enhanced by anabolic steroids on top of it. I just think that this is really, to me, where people put their foot down, and there needs to be more of a deterrent. You're never going to eradicate steroid use in this sport, but man,
and that's the problem.
Out-of-competition testing is really shining a light on some ugly truths.
And that's it. You say, you talk about the real ugly truth, and the real ugly truth of the matter is you'll probably never get rid of this stuff. Where there's money involved, guys are willing to cheat. And when one guy is cheating, it changes the landscape, and a lot of guys feel the need to cheat as well.
Very big story. Anderson Silva and Nick Diaz both failing their drug screenings from UFC 183. He is John Ramdian. I'm John Pollock. We have more Fight News Now Extra coming up.